Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Twitter or X or whatever the hell it's called. I don't care because honestly, I am dead inside. My sports fandom has taken a major hit this week, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to go on. Sure, the Mets got David Stearns, and that's great news, but it's going to be a hard one for me this week, guys. It is because my sports life is has been preoccupied by the other show and my other biggest part of my fandom. Chris Ferrara chiming in with the noticeable addition. Yes, John shaved. And with that, I should say, do not attempt to adjust your viewing screens, whether it's your phone or your computer or your iPad or whatever the hell it is. Yes, I shaved my beard. Why? Well, I tend to do it like once a year anyway. I let my face breathe, but mainly because of Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. And I just got, I don't know. I needed to change something. Anyway, my name is John Sapanero. I'm out in Los Angeles, California. My co-host holding it down back in New Jersey, the site of where all things go wrong. Matt Ibby Ivanez is holding it down. Ibby, yeah. How you feeling, man?
John, I'm feeling pretty good. Before we went on, I was talking with John and just saying, like, by proxy, I'm kind of like this closeted Jet fan because I have a lot of Jet fan friends and I'm in some Jet chats with them and we talk football and things like that. So I was blindsided as well. Probably not as hard as a true diehard Jet fan was, but I was completely like blown away. Like, of all things, of all teams, for it to happen to, like, we get that. You know, it's the Jets. Of course, it's going to happen and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, if you guys listen and follow to the goddamn Jets, if you don't, you should. And John said it so eloquently last night, how he doesn't believe in curses and things of that nature. Neither do I. I think it's all nonsense. It's just bad luck. And that's football. You look across the league, a bunch of injuries happened in week one. And it's unfortunate. The turf, the rain, the age, whatever you want to point to. Just unfortunate. But what's going to be more awesome for Jet fans is when this Rodgers to Wilson story turns into a greater one than Bledsoe to Brady. That's what it's going to be, baby. That's what you got to do. The Jet defense is awesome. They had a great game. Go in there, beat the shit out of Dallas. Do what you got to do. And that's what I got to say on the Jets. But there's a lot to talk about when it comes to our New York Mets. And I'm hoping that we can bring a smile to my partner's face to bring up his spirits a little bit because he's been on an emotional roller coaster. And I know the chat's going to bring it today. So let's have a show.
Yeah, James Dowling echoing what you said. Jets win it all with Zach Wilson, following it up with the ha-ha. And the ha-ha, very accurate there. I don't know if the Jets can win. Not a Jets podcast. Of course, I do have a Jets podcast. I have put on my old school Jets pin. If you are in this chat, and you are a Jets and Mets fan like me, and you didn't know that I had one, it's called The Goddamn Jets. We do it live, just like we do here with Till Mets Do Us Part. We go live 7:30 p.m. every Tuesday. So this week's episode is already aired. You can find it like you can find this show, courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network across all of the things, Spotify and Apple and Google and Amazon and all those places. And, of course, you can follow us live on a very appropriate named podcast and a very appropriate named YouTube channel, The Goddamn Jets. Anyway, let's move on from the Jets conversation to the Mets conversation. In all seriousness, I will say the only reason why I bring this up is twofold. One, because there are a lot of people out there in the world, like Ibby mentioned, that are like me, that are Mets and Jets fans. Of course, that's a huge overlap. And really, Ibby, like you said, it has been a roller coaster of emotions for anybody who fits that description, who is a fan of these two teams. And the segue here is because of the David Stearns stuff. I mentioned it on my Jets show yesterday. One of my co-hosts, Kimberly Cantoni, is also a Jets and Mets fan. She's also a Jets flight crew cheerleader. So she kind of like grew up in that whole like atmosphere. But I brought it up then that this David Stearns news added to this roller coaster, because I'm going to just paint the picture for all of you. And yes, like Chris Ferraro says, go ahead and like the video if you like what you're watching. And we're going to get to as many comments as we can, always, each and every single time. But to paint the picture for you, I'm pumped up, as any Jets fan is. I'm pumped up to go into Monday Night Football and finally see this team the way it was envisioned do their thing. And it obviously does not go the Jets' way. And at halftime, I had a softball game when the game was over. And so at halftime, I almost said, like, I got to refocus. I can't watch this. I'm distraught. And I almost just turned it off and did something else. But I decided not to. I stuck it out. I made it through the entire game. And of course, the Jets win the game. And it is now just a game that they normally would fumble away. It's a game that they would add insult to injury with in the past by losing it, but they don't. And so there's the first upswing, downswing of the roller coaster, right? Then we get into the next morning. It is Tuesday morning, and you find out officially that Aaron Rodgers has torn his Achilles and that he is out for the year. So now you're bad news, he gets hurt. Good news, they win the game. Bad news, worst fears confirmed. And then if you're a Mets fan like me, and this is where the conversation and the long-windedness comes full circle, the Mets hired David Stearns. Ibby, I don't know if my fragile sports fan heart can take it. I don't. And I put something on my Instagram. I mapped out that entire, timeline of events. And for those of you who follow me on Instagram, you may have seen it. And I was like, ladies and gentlemen, if you have kids and they want to get into sports, discourage it. Would not recommend 0 stars, because this is the kind of shit that happens. And obviously that is a tongue-in-cheek comment because I love sports, specifically football and baseball. They're the two teams and the two sports I care about the most. And it has been a wild week, but I am happy that I have outlets, both with the goddamn Jets and here with Till Metz do his part to talk about these things and to talk with you amazing fans. So that said, Ibby, one of the worst kept secrets in some circles in all of baseball, where David Stearns now unofficially, but according to all reports, is going to be with the Mets for the next 5 years, at least $10 million deal, it sounds like, which puts him right in line with Andrew Friedman, who runs the Dodgers. And I think that's the kind of deal it was going to take to get a guy like that anywhere. I don't think the Mets paid extra. I think if Houston would have signed him, it would have cost about the same, because he is held, in high esteem. And guys like this don't become available. That's why no matter how much of a long shot it was for the Mets to flirt with Theo Epstein when Cohen first took over, they had to, because guys who are really great executives don't become available. And so it was an unbelievable coup for the Mets to go out here and get David Stearns. He's going to take over, it looks like, the day after the regular season ends, which is perfect timing because he can now be a full-fledged participant in the offseason. I know that he's sort of out as far as the Brewers go. Like, he's not actually doing work with them. He's just under contract. So I'm sure there's also some stuff going on right now with the Mets behind the scenes that, he's not supposed to do, but he's probably doing in some way, shape, or form. And of course, the guy has been around baseball a long time, so he has his own plans. But all of that being said, I'm absolutely thrilled. I think David Stearns is the right person. I will stop talking about this. Your thoughts, Ibby? Ibby?
Well, I can see that my thing might be cutting in and out. I hope people hear me, or maybe John's cutting out. I'm not sure which is which.
It's you.
But it's probably my end. But when it comes to this, it's me. Of course, it's always me because I'm a pain in the ass. But hopefully it gets better. But in terms of, David Stearns and everything that's gone on with him, worst kept secret, however you want to put it. I'm seeing the chat now. Yes, it is me. But when it comes to Stearns, for the longest time, I didn't know exactly what to think. And I think back to when we had Casey Stern on the show, and we asked him, what are your thoughts on David Stearns and things like that? And he goes, he is everything that people talk about in the high regard, the Andrew Friedmans of the world, the Eric Neanders of the world, like the really smart guys of baseball that you want, that can transform your team, right? So I hear all these things, but I was like, I still think, how come no one is really talking in terms of really in depth and giving me something? And future coming back, guest of the show, Will Sam will be here eventually. Not today, maybe next week. We'll see what goes on. But I
should have mentioned that. He had a scheduling conflict.
It's all good.
Couldn't make it today, but maybe next week, maybe the week after, we'll deep dive on this hiring with Will Sam from the Athletic.
Right. So the fact that he put out an article that I was going to bring up to him, and I'll bring it up to him next week as well, wrote a fantastic article breaking down exactly who David Stearns is, like an article that I've been waiting for, get an understanding of this guy. What's he like behind closed doors? How does he build? What does he look for? How does he work with analytics? Why does everyone hold him in such high regard? And I read the article, and I'm not going to go through it, word by word, but I encourage anyone to read it because it was fantastic. And it painted this picture. And I texted John right afterwards. I was like, I just read this article and I'm like literally ready to run through a wall because I'm so excited. Now I'm like, get the deal done. Like, get this guy in the building. I want him here. Right. So the fact that he is going to be here. And I read John Harper's piece today as well, talking about him and the things that he did on the early goings in Milwaukee and the trades that he made to make the team better and the pitching lab and all the things that he focuses on, how he views power as a huge building point. I think the term that was used was power, and pitching is used as his analytical fulcrum in terms of how he wants to build, which brought up the whole question on Pete Alonso. So it's like he knows what he wants. He knows how to build. And now he's ours. He's in the building. He's going to choose the people that he wants to be with. And we'll talk about Billy Epler in a minute as well. Like, he knows the people that he wants on staff. We'll see how this goes in terms of our manager. Will Buck step down? We'll talk about that. Could Craig Counsell be a piece? We'll see. We'll talk about it. We'll give some ideas and feed into the speculation and rumors. But overall, man, I am so excited because since day one on this show, hey, Matt Williams is here. Since day one on this show, I have been saying how my biggest thing has always been a plan. I want smart people in the building. It took a while. Steve Cohen said, I'm a patient man. I've been patient. I'm going to get my guy. He got the guy. He's here. He's ready to build with the team that he grew up loving to watch and listening to on the radio. I'm pumped up. Every Mets fan should be excited about this because now the work gets to be put in, and hopefully within a couple of years, maybe as soon as next year, with being competitive, we can put a winning product on the field that we can all be proud of for that sustainable amount of time that we've all been searching for the longest time.
I love everything you just said. I'm going to jump into the comments because so many are flying in and some are very topical on Stearns and some of them are just funny and I didn't really get to them before. Carlos Ramos checking in saying, for future reference, Hollywood John shaving his face should be a live episode. I will take that under advisement. We've got Young Ho Lee saying, who's this new co-host? I missed the old co-host. Obviously referring to me. We got Patty at NYC saying, I subscribe to the goddamn Jets. Thank you for doing that. Chris Ferraro, who is back after dealing with some stuff. We saw the early things right before we went live. Hope your girlfriend's doing okay. I'm ready for the Stearns era. I am pumped. Patty also saying the hats are rocking this week, guys. James Dowling nailing it. Good old glass case of emotion for John so far this week. Yes, absolutely a glass case of emotion for me. Chris Ferraro saying 10 mil. That is a drop in the bucket for Uncle Steve. So let's get into some of these other, more specific and topical questions, if you will, Ibby. Carlos Ortiz saying, I know he probably wasn't available, but don't you think Epstein would have been better? Because I mentioned Epstein. Look, you can't ignore the track record from me. You can't ignore the fact that Theo Epstein has broken not one, but two curses, right? We opened up this show talking about the possibility of cursed teams. I said I don't believe in it as far as my Jets are concerned, but man, it's getting fucking close. But, he turns around two curses. A lot of people buy into that, right? But you do have to look at the fact that, yes, you can't argue with the resume. So would he have been better? I guess so. Absolutely. Right. Because he's done it and he's done it in two different places. But you also have to think about the hunger aspect and whether or not a guy wants to be here. Something my co-host Tom always says on the goddamn Jets when we talk about NFL free agents specifically, but you could talk about it in the scope of all sports fandom. A guy wanting to be here matters. And if Theo Epstein was only going to come here because Steve Cohen gave him $15 million or $20 million or partial ownership in the team, you have to question whether or not that person is going to be all in the process. And I know Theo Epstein is still super young, and I've met Theo Epstein. Seems like a really nice guy. Seems like the kind of guy who obviously can handle doing it here. He did it in two of the biggest sports markets in the country with arguably more scrutiny than even here in New York, because everybody knows how tough Boston and Chicago can be, especially on the Red Sox and the Cubs. But wanting to be here and having something left to prove, I think matters. I think those two things matter. So resumes aside, yeah, Epstein probably the better pick if he's available and wants to come here. But I think 1, he's not available. 2, I don't think he really wants to come here. 3, you wonder what he has left to prove. And I think he has his eyes on other things, maybe being the MLB commissioner at some point. Like, I think he has his eyes on different stuff. David Stearns clearly wants this job. David Stearns grew up a Met fan, although I don't think that matters. It's a good story, but like, you could be a good executive without being a fan of a team. But he wanted this job. I think that's why I kept saying, like, the flirtation with Houston didn't really scare me, because it seemed like from a couple of years ago when Milwaukee wouldn't let him talk to the Mets, it's because they knew he probably would have gone. And they could have blocked it because it was a lateral move. They had already elevated him to their president of baseball ops. And look, in the time that he's been GM and the time that he's been president of baseball ops in Milwaukee, they've had a lot of playoff berths. They've had a lot of division titles. He's built a good team. And Ibby, to your point, I think power and pitching is a great way to build. I think it sets up nicely with partially how the Mets are already built. I think Pete Alonso is one of the best power hitters in the game. I've talked about that. He's proven that time and time again. I think he's already entrenched in the center of that lineup, and that you've got other guys with power potential like Mauricio, like Alvarez. Obviously, Lindor is no slouch in the power department. He's going to hit 25, maybe 30 bombs. We'll see what goes on the rest of this year. And so I think you're looking at, the right guy at the right time for the right job. And so to me, it's hard to put, I guess the best way to say this is, it's hard to put anybody over Theo Epstein for what he was able to do in 2 places. But I think right now, the Mets got the right guy. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I look, everyone knows, like you said, the track record of Theo Epstein and what he's done in the game. But I think he's beyond that now, mainly because it's like, I think when you are that accomplished as a front office executive, it's like, yeah, I won a title with the Boston Red Sox. I won a title with the Chicago Cubs. I broke these quote unquote curses. It's like, well, what else is there for me to prove? Like, you could say for a Theo Epstein, it could be something along the lines of, yeah, but what if you do it with the Mets too? The Mets haven't won since '86. It would mean so much. You'd be a superstar in New York, Boston, and Chicago. You would be all time. You might be the greatest front office executive of all time, and this and that. It's like, well, first of all, he doesn't need to go to the Mets to do that. He's already considered one of those because of those things that he's done.
Correct.
So it's like, you look beyond, and the thing has always been, he wants to be a part of a group that can either become an owner of a team or be a part of an expansion group to get a new team and be a part of that process and take on a new challenge. I think when you are that high up when it comes to your intellect and being a smart guy within a certain field, you look for new challenges. And it's like, I did the GM thing. I did the president of baseball ops thing. I succeeded in that. What's the next challenge? I want to be a part of a group that owns a team and then build that way. And then, or be a part of just an existing team or an expansion team, whatever it may be. That's your next challenge. So I think the idea of Theo, it hasn't really been in my mind for a long time. Originally, when Cohen came in, it's like, oh yeah, call Theo, maybe. And then it's like, you know what? I don't think he wants this anymore. David Stearns has been the target with good reason, young, hungry, wants to be a part of what's going on here in New York, because look, there's nothing that confirms this, but one could say when he was turned down by Mark, and I think it's Anastasio, the owner over in Milwaukee, when he gets turned down from being able to interview here with Cohen, like you said, because he assumed he's probably going to go, turns him down. And then guess what happens? The next year, he ends up walking away. I'm going to become an advisor now too. I'll stay around, but I'm just an advisor. You wonder if there was like a little bit of poisoning the well there in terms of relationships, because he's pissed off because he wasn't able to go. Of course, he's not going to burn bridges.
Sorry to interrupt, but
okay.
I think that's a really underrated point. And I don't think it's a coincidence that David Stearns tries to get permission to just interview with the Mets, and the Brewers turn it down, as is their right. And look,
of course, yes.
The Brewers and no other team in Major League Baseball is here to make the Mets better. right?
No.
That's why executives were getting blocked left and right. Everybody's like, look, this guy has so much money. We're not going to let him come in here. Some guys didn't even want him to be the owner, right? So I understand that they don't have to allow this to happen. But I think as a goodwill gesture, as a good faith gesture, as an owner, you should have a conversation with your president of baseball ops and say, okay, what are you thinking about this? Okay, fine. All right. Is there a realistic chance you would take this job? Okay, fine. Or if he just says, look, man, this is a big opportunity for me. This is the team I started with. This is the team I grew up rooting for. And I just want to hear them out. I just want to hear them out on this. I think you are kind of doing your guy a disservice. You know, it's short-term thinking versus long-term thinking. Because he might go over there and say, hey, you know what? I talked to them. Grass isn't always greener. It seems like it would be a great opportunity, but I love what we're doing here in Milwaukee, and I am going to stay. And maybe if he has that meeting 3 years ago, maybe right now he's still the president of baseball operations of the Brewers. Yeah. So I think there is a little bit of poisoning the well or whatever analogy you just used. I think that makes a ton of sense. Now you're running the risk, but it's kind of the if you love something, let it go, and if it comes back to you sort of thing. You know, let the guy go see if it's better. And if you're so, as an owner, if you're so secure in what your franchise is doing and what your franchise can offer that person, let him go. The Yankees, it's a little bit of apples and oranges, but the Yankees, when Steinbrenner ran the team, they let Derek Jeter go to free agency. They let Bernie Williams go to free agency. They said, go ahead, go get the offers, go do your thing, go to college, you know, go sow your wild oats 4 years away. You'll come back. And they always did. Yep. They always did because they knew the money would be right and they knew what the winning and the sustainability was. So I think sometimes you got to let the guy go and see what the situation is going to be like. Sometimes they turn down the offer.
Yeah. But yeah, just to bring it back to just to finish that point, it was simply, you know, when you don't offer someone that opportunity, it might be, you know, make you a little bit sour, but at the same time, he never burned a bridge. He stayed on, he stuck around, stayed on as an advisor, has good people around him, which is what that article also talked about, the people he surrounds himself with. He empowers people. Matt Arnold is a guy that many within baseball have been saying for years could be a great GM, great president of baseball ops, and now he has a job working the high-end spots for Milwaukee. So it's like Stearns hangs around, can be the advisor, show that I'm leaving. Basically, it's like it's a foregone conclusion, probably like I'm leaving in good faith. I'm leaving you in good hands. This is a good guy. This is a great guy. I chose whatever. Like he's doing things right. You don't want to burn bridges because you never know what can happen in baseball, regardless of a 5-year, $50 million, like whatever. Regardless of whatever it may be. But he handles it right, does all the right things, says all the right things, and we'll see what, you know, his attack for this team is going to be, which I'm sure we'll talk about throughout this episode, what his attack might be for this team moving forward. Because look, when you clear out all the chips like the Mets did, and clearly something was up when that was happening because you don't make those moves blind, you clear out all the chips, you give him free reign. He has money to work with. He has opportunity for people to bring in. I'm sure he's not going to poach. I don't think he's going to poach from Milwaukee, but he'll bring guys that he thinks can fit. And you know, this is where the fun starts, when being able to build from the, I don't want to say from the ground up, but you know, there's a big difference when you're working within tight constraints, like you would in a Milwaukee, like you would in a Cleveland, like you would even in a Tampa Bay. But then when you come to the big time, you got all the cash. It depends on, you know, can you make it work the same way? And I think he's ready to take on that test, because you're not pinching pennies in New York, not with Steve Cohen. So you're going to have all the opportunity in the world to succeed, and we're going to find out if we can do it.
Yeah, and this is a good point here from James Dowling, and there's a lot of really great comments. Keep them flooding in. Obviously, we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Yeah. People didn't like the trade deadline, and I think what he means is like the fact that we had to be where we were as sellers at the trade deadline. Most people have liked the trade deadline in hindsight, but people didn't like the trade deadline. But I think with how everything ended up, it was the best thing that happened to the Mets. And the reason why I bring that up as a good point off of what you said, Ibby, is that the Mets now have an embarrassment of riches, both in the literal money sense, because Steve Cohen is their owner, They're going to have money coming off the books over the next 2 years, which is going to give them a little bit more financial flexibility. And now they have a lot of prospects in their organization from which to deal from or elevate. And that is how you build a team, with money and with prospects. You either turn the prospects into players on your roster, or you turn the prospects into players on other people's rosters that you would like to acquire. Maybe Brendan Woodruff, maybe Corbin Burns, maybe, I don't know. I'm just throwing out names. It's early, but we know that things like that are going to, potentially be on the table, because the Mets are going to have to be creative in how they build this team, because you're not going to want to just throw money at everybody, because they did that this year because they had to. They did that this year because the team arrived probably earlier than any of us would have expected. They win 101 games. They got 10 free agents that were big parts of doing that. And the end result is, look, we got to bring these guys back, because if we don't bring this team back to just won 101 games and we win 81 games, we're going to get killed. In the court of public opinion, we're going to get absolutely crucified. Now, would that have been a smarter, more prudent move? Yeah, hindsight being 2020, I'm sure it would have been. But again, like I've said a million times, the Mets lose Jacob deGrom and they go, hey, don't worry, guys, we brought back Trevor Williams, Seth Lugo, and we signed Nate Eovaldi. There would have been riots. There would have been riots up Northern Boulevard. They would have been like burning effigies of Steve Cohen. So, I understand that hindsight is 2020, but the Mets are now set up from everything that happened. The bad this year was part of the good, hopefully, going forward. Matt Williams, great contributor, guest on this show, said the Mets finally have a competent individual leading the front office. Is this real life? This will lead to more competent individuals wanting to be here. I think that's a great point. That's what you said as well. And, look, I think ultimately it's the same conversation we had after the trade deadline, Ibby. Baseball is a young man's game.
Yes, it is.
Baseball is filled with young, exciting, athletic talent. And on the other side of baseball, in the front offices, it is filled with smart, mostly young. I'm not being ageist here, but just to continue the analogy. It's filled with these outside-the-box thinkers. And that's not to say you have to be married to analytics. It's not to say that you have to do what Billy Beane does. You have to, though, be willing to be creative. You have to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take on this money here, but I'm going to spread this out here. I'm going to get this guy here. I'm going to find the guy who's undervalued, the DJ Stewarts of the world, the R.A. Dickies of the world. You have to be able to be creative. And obviously, Moneyball and the Billy Beane stuff, that was 2 decades ago now. And that stuff doesn't work the way it used to for Oakland, because other teams copied it. And other teams with more money and more resources were able to do it better than they could.
Yes.
But you have to find the next thing. I said when the Mets let Aaron Loop walk, they were smart, because he was never going to be that good again. And I said, good organizations find the next Aaron Loop. And in some ways, they kind of sort of did. They found spare parts and guys who, hey, never knew Adam Ottavino was going to have the year that he had last season, but he did. It was a great year for him, all that stuff. Good organizations do that. Good organizations that are run, that's a micro version of this. The larger picture is good organizations that are run by competent, smart people in baseball, Ibby. They do that stuff all the time. They find the stuff that other people aren't looking at, whether it be a player's peripherals, whether it be a hole in a guy's swing. And I use the hole in the guy's swing because that's something that's not analytics, right? You might look at David Stearns might sit down with Eric Chavez and say, hey, look at this guy in San Diego. He's riding the bench. They have a bloated roster. What's up with this dude? I think I did something similar when I was young, and I think I can't hit the high fastball. I think he can't hit the high fastball, but I think if he does A, B, and C, we could do that. Okay, maybe we'll target that guy. We'll trade a low-level prospect for him. We'll get him here. And maybe the Mets have a Justin Turner on their hands. Yeah. You know what I mean? Maybe they have somebody they could turn into that. That is the kind of thing that us as Mets fans, everybody watching, everybody listening, that's what David Stearns represents to me.
Yeah, I mean, It's always, and we always echo it because it's what Steve Cohen has said from the jump. It's that Dodger model. It's finding these players. It's not just money. And I see, Carlos in the comments mentioning it's not always about money and spending, and it's true, it's not. But it's good to have those resources because when you do things right, when you do build from within, and yes, it takes time, but when you do those things, it allows you to find those finishing pieces when that money that you do have, because you are filthy rich like Steve Cohen is, you can bring in those finishing pieces in order to really put an exclamation point on the hard work that you've done when it comes to finding those players. And we always talk about the Dodgers because the Dodgers are just a machine. They have been for the longest time. Whether
the
they
Dodgers are better at it than everybody else. The only team that comes close is the Rays. And honestly, the Rays would be the Dodgers if they had more money.
But the craziest thing about, like, when you look at the Dodgers, it's like when you see all the talent that they pump out and that they draft and that they find, whether it's through the actual draft, through the international draft, wherever it may be. The insane thing is when you look back and you look at some of the trades they did make and the players they got rid of, I'm pretty sure they drafted Yordan Alvarez. I'm pretty sure they drafted O'Neal Cruz as well.
Yes,
it's like, it's nuts when you see the amount of talent. And then the biggest thing is the rehab. And like you said, when you can find someone and fix someone, when you can find some low-level lefty out in Oakland who looks like he might have something, but he's not really showing anything, but then he comes to the Dodgers. Oh, by the way, that guy's name, he's Max Muncy. He's got 30 homers and 100 RBIs almost every year. Okay? Chris Taylor, Justin Turner, like you mentioned. I think Jolly Olive posted the other day. Justin Turner, if he got a better opportunity from the jump, he could be like a borderline Hall of Famer. When you look at his numbers for like the last 10 years, it's kind of insane when you really look at his numbers.
It was from Jolly Olive.
It's nuts.
29 to 39. He's put up some MVP caliber seasons.
It's insane.
And a lot of them. And, look, obviously he had to make tweaks to his swing and stuff like that. And this is not being revisionist. We didn't do a show back then. No. I thought the Mets, and I said this at the time, and I stand by this. I think the Mets designating Turner for assignment was a more egregious move than letting Daniel Murphy walk in free agency. And part of why I say that, some people are going to tell me I'm crazy because of what Daniel Murphy went on to do with the Nats and how he beat up on us, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But Daniel Murphy, I'm not going to go as far to say that he was a net negative like Gary Cohen said. But Daniel Murphy was a fundamentally flawed player. Everybody wants to talk about how Pete is one-dimensional. Daniel Murphy was a very one-dimensional player, and his dimensions and his ceilings to the point of where he was in his Mets career outside of the run he did in the playoffs was not even as high as Pete, right? Yeah. Like, he was just the guy who was a really good all-around pure hitter, not a great power hitter, not a great average hitter, hit the ball hard, did a little bit of everything right, but he was also a free agent. He was also a free agent later in his career, a la what, McNeil would have been, kind of in that sort of boat. Even McNeil a little bit later still, if they didn't extend him when they did. But free agency, you have to make decisions. You have to make tough decisions. Can we be better by spending this money? And it's going to be a lot of money, quote unquote, elsewhere. When you have a guy under control like Justin Turner, who showed some flashes. Now, I never thought, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys and say I thought Justin Turner was going to become what he became. But, Ibby, I always thought for the Mets, Justin Turner did a lot of things well, playing short, playing second, playing third, playing a little bit of first, moving around. I thought he was a useful piece. And I thought designating him for assignment and getting rid of him for nothing was foolish. They didn't get rid of Daniel Murphy for nothing. They chose to spend that money elsewhere and not sign him to what would be a quote-unquote big free agent deal. And so, in a vacuum, Murphy is probably the bigger loss just in terms of what Murphy actually meant to the team versus what Turner meant to the team. But when you look at where their careers went and why they were let go, nothing exists in a vacuum. And letting Justin Turner just go for nothing, saying, we don't need you on the 40-man roster, to me, that's a more egregious mistake, honestly. And it's a mistake that I want to see the Mets not make again. And I think more competent people will lead to that.
And I think that, it comes down to the ones that are in charge of player development and getting the most out of their players. Because I've said on the show multiple times that for the longest time, this team, I don't subscribe to the idea that everyone that comes here and they fail, it's mainly because they can't handle New York. Like that's always the go-to. I feel like it's a crutch. I don't like it. Is it the case sometimes? Sure, maybe. Is it the end all be all reason? No, because these guys are talented ball players. They come here, they don't do well, or nothing, or something is not unlocked. Then they go somewhere else, and then they become superstars. It's not because it's you're going from New York to Washington or New York to Cleveland or whatever. It's like, no, something is fundamentally wrong if we cannot find these things, but other teams are finding them. This is why I'm excited about getting smart people in the building, and they can in turn hire smart people to do these things so these situations don't happen. So you can get the most out of a Travis Darno. So you don't let a Justin Turner go and you can get the most out of him. Because look, we can be honest. They were never going to do those things here with the pieces that were in place when it came to instruction. Because it's clear as day, because the development of players over that period of time, that decade of time, 12 years, whatever, hasn't been that great. Outside of a couple guys, Pete Alonso mainly coming up from the hitting standpoint that became a superstar, like a lot's not there. So it's always been a curious thing to me. I'm continuously going to be curious to then see what David Stearns can bring to the table, who he brings in, and if these things change, because let's be honest, we're all excited right now. Rumble Pony baseball, baby, playoff baseball for those Rumble Ponies. And we're seeing all those players that we have down there from the positional standpoint. We're so used to a Mets organization of having pitchers. Now pitchers are kind of thin. They're working their way up. Now we're front loaded with a lot of bats. Can these bats then translate to the next level? Okay. And those are questions that need to be answered. And if they fail, can they be fixed? Okay. We're seeing that now. Francisco Alvarez comes up, fails a little bit, goes on, gets his stride, 20-something home runs. Could break the record. We'll see. But still, showing out. Mark Vientos is starting to show out a little bit more, hitting a little bit here and there when he gets a chance to hit. Ryan Mauricio, who we'll talk about, hitting the shit out of the ball, hitting piss missiles everywhere. 97 miles an hour plus every time he puts the ball in play. Hitting the ball hard. Brett Beatty, on the other hand, struggling. Not able to stay up with what the other guys are doing. Can that be fixed? Are the right people in place to help him get this fixed? I know Carson's already in the comments. He's probably going to have something to say about Brett Beatty the second I mentioned him, because I jumped in his chat yesterday throwing jokes at him. So I'll make sure that I lay him up there for a shot if you would like to take it. But Brett Beatty, struggling. So are the proper people going to be in place to help said players unlock what they need to unlock to stop hitting the ball on the ground, to focus more, to do all these things that it requires to be a top level baseball player? Because for the longest time, the New York Mets have not had that type of leadership to get the most out of their players.
They have not. Let's leave it right there. We'll head into the break. Of course, for everybody who is watching right now, that watches all the time, the break is super short for the live version, only 10 seconds. It's an ad spot we need for the audio version of this show. While we're in the break, do not be afraid to hit the like button, the thumbs up, if you haven't already. So that said, it's John Sapanaro. It's Matt Ibby Ibanez. It is Till Mets Do Us Part. We still have plenty more to get to. We will be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, Till Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. Of course, watching us here live on YouTube is the best way to interact with the show and become a full-fledged participant in the show, because your questions, your comments, your concerns, everything, even breaking news from Shay, this just in, and Citi Field will host the first ever Dominican Winter League Series between rivals. The 3-game series will take place on November 10th through the 12th. There you go. You can throw in some breaking news, stuff that we can't get because we are hosting a show. Appreciate Shay dropping that in there.
Thank you, Shay.
All that stuff comes in real time. If you watch on Twitter or X, that's great, but sometimes we don't get the comments and the questions and all that stuff in real time because you can't post the same way. So that's the perfect way to become a full-fledged member of the show. But of course, if you can't do that, I saw Chris Ferraro had to step away. You can't watch the entire show. It's all good. As soon as we're done with the show here, this entire thing will live forever on our YouTube channel, which is appropriately called Till Mets Do Us Part. If you subscribe, it will make sure that you always know when a new episode drops. If you turn notifications on, it will let you know, hey, they're going to be live in 2 hours or tomorrow or whatever, so that you can tune in live for at least a little bit. And if you can't do any of that, you can listen to the audio version of this show starting tomorrow morning, wherever it is you get your podcast, all courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network. Ibby, we got about 20, 25 minutes left in the show. I didn't want to bring this up at first when the Stearns stuff dropped. But since the Stearns stuff dropped, some other stuff has started to come out. And the reason why I didn't want to bring this up is because it's too early. It's purely speculative. And this conversation is going to be just that. However, I think some of the things that have come out since about the Mets' potential managerial situation going forward is something that we can talk about, even if it's in a hypothetical situation. And Chris Ferraro brought it up earlier in the chat. Credit to him for saying, hey, chat poll, do we think Buck is going to be the manager next season? People started to weigh in. All that stuff. And I want people to continue to weigh in. Do you think Buck will be the manager next year? Ibby, if you asked me a week ago, I would have said 100% that Buck is the manager next year. It's the last year of his contract. He's had a great year and a bad year. He's going to see this thing through. If you asked me the minute Stearns was hired to be the president of baseball operations, I would have said, Buck's going to be here. He's had a really great year and a bad year. He's got 1 year left. He's going to see this thing through. But then there's some stuff about Buck maybe looking to step away anyway. Maybe Buck can take an advisory role. Somebody suggested that. I think it might have been Patty in NYC, a la Terry Collins. He can be in the organization, doesn't have to necessarily be the manager. I would put the odds right now, and this is not a hedge. This is just the true feeling. I would put the odds right now compared to a week ago, 50-50, coin flip, whether or not Buck Showalter comes back. And my feeling is, I think David Stearns is going to want to bring in his own guys. Now, whether that means Craig Counsell or somebody else, we'll see. But I also think, just like Steve Cohen did with David Stearns, sometimes you got to wait to bring in your guy. And I don't think he is going to scrap everything, tear down the city in one offseason when he can just wait a year and let his manager's contract expire and then go get somebody else. So do I think in a perfect world, Stearns wants to put his stamp by attaching his manager to this team? I do. But I think we don't live in a perfect world. And I think that there is a chance, just because of availability, because of contracts, because of want to, because of access, a million other things, I think Buck Showalter is still a decent option to be the manager. And so, I don't see them firing him and then elevating, let's say, Eric Chavez, and then Craig Counsell becomes available and then firing Chavez. It's a lot of moving parts when you can just move the goalpost a year. Does that make sense? You're muted, so if it makes sense, unmute yourself.
It does make sense what you're saying. Sorry about that. It does make sense with what you're saying. Is Counsell not free after this year? Does he still have a year? I thought he was free. Is he not?
I'm not 100% sure. We can check on that, of course. And if anybody's in the comments, they can check on that as well.
Yeah, because I thought he was free. And I think that if he definitely is, I think it comes down to, does he want to take like a break? Does he want to, does he have like a family that he wants to tend to as well? He wants to take a break for a season, then come back. If that was him, if that was thrown out there originally because he was just surveying what might be available. Now you see what's going on with Stearns. He knows Stearns. That was his guy. Going to New York. Does he want to manage in New York? I'm kind of at a point right now where I'm 70-30. Is in the final year. He signed a 3-year extension. Yeah. Okay. So there you go from Shay. So I'm like 70-30 in the camp that I think that a new manager is going to be here for the Mets next year. It goes with my entire thing that I've always been saying, and that's don't half-ass something. If you're going to change something, if you're bringing in new people, let people choose who they want. Don't force someone to wait a year. Don't force someone to take on, leftover from something else because you feel as though that you owe it to said person or whatever it may be. I think we're at a point where I think Buck Showalter is going to step down. I don't think, and this is me just speculating, of course. 100%.
That's all this is. And again, like that's such a huge part of sports and having this show and all that stuff. Everything all of us are saying is purely made up. None of us know. And I don't think anybody knows outside of maybe Buck Showalter. Buck Showalter himself may have an idea. I'm stepping down.
Right.
But anybody else, they don't know. I don't think anybody in the Mets organization even knows. It's too early.
There was, I think it was Michael Marino who put something out there yesterday that, kind of planted a little seed in my head where he was talking about the potential of stepping down and things like that from sources that he has. Then, of course, the question was asked to Buck, and then he said, I haven't spoken to anyone or what have you. I don't think that Steve Cohen and the New York Mets are going to outright fire in that sense. I know other Mets fans would say, fire his ass, get counsel in here or whatever. I don't think they're going to fire him. I think he's going to step down. It's better wording. It shows that there's no ill will and things like that. It's doing things professionally, stuff like that, because, one could argue and say that, Buck got blindsided this year because the injuries and things happen and what have you, and they're not going to put it all on him. Does he deserve some blame? Yes, he does. All the blame?
Fair,
no. Yeah.
They shouldn't put it all on him.
No,
I know you were just saying that. He doesn't deserve all the blame. He deserves blame when you come into the season after winning 101 games and you bring in the talent they brought in and you spend the money that they spend and you have legitimate World Series aspirations and you don't even make the playoffs. Everybody deserves blame. Buck Showalter, Steve Cohen, Billy Epler, Jeremy Hefner, Eric Chavez, the guy who sweeps the clubhouse, everybody, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, people didn't do their job to the degree that they needed to do their job. Everyone in the organization who had a hand in this deserves some blame. Laying it all at the feet of Buck Showalter is not fair to him, and it's not accurate. It's just not.
I'm going back in the comments real quick. Carlos, I see that you're saying something I said. Is that you asking why I think he's going to step down? If that's the case,
and why you think they won't just fire him? That's the impression.
Okay, so I don't think, for what I just said, I don't think that they are going to put 100% blame on him because you gave him an older roster. Guys got hurt. Things were unfortunate. Guys had bad years because. One could easily go back to what we always say the previous year. Did they play over their head? Most likely. They won 101 games. You weren't bitching about the guy then. People weren't asking for his head then. They're asking for it when the team goes down. Made questionable calls. Like we said, some is at his feet, but not everything. So I think that they're more likely to have a conversation with him because he's, 68 years old, 67, 68 years old. And he might simply say, yeah, you know what? I don't want to be a lame duck coach. I don't want to be a second thought for somebody else. I don't want to be someone's leftover choice. If they have someone that they want, I don't want to have these eyes on me. That's more added pressure on me in a sense where this team might be in transition. Maybe I'm not a part of this transition, but I can still help the team, which with the whole advisory role, working within an office with Billy Epler, who has a close relationship with, who we know is still going to be here. If that's something that David Stearns wants to have within his front office, I think that seems more likely. I do not think he's going to get fired. I think he would step down. At the moment, I'm like 70-30. Once we get a little bit more information on Craig Counsell and understanding exactly what may happen, does he want to continue managing? Does he want to step away for a year? Whatever it may be. If he wants to keep managing, I fully believe that Buck Showalter will step down and David Stearns will get his guy because they want to build something and they have to be cohesive. It has to start from Jump Street. You do not do this halfway. You go all the way. So that's the way I view it. If it's going to happen that way, I think it's really dependent on Craig Counsell.
I agree with that. Shay agreeing with me. The guy who sweeps the clubhouse, I hate that guy. He's a real dick. Real dick. His name is Eddie, I think. No, of course I'm kidding. Carson saying Buck won't be here after next season no matter what. So whatever direction they go in, it's the expectation. It all depends on on when it happens. Stern will get his own manager eventually. And I agree with that. I think that when you look at the landscape of this, you just have to have care, Ibby, in how you handle this. You know, fans are so quick to say fire his ass.
Yeah.
Not everybody deserves. Maybe I'm talking about shit that people don't want to hear because it's feelings. And every time I talk about, oh, you got to worry about this guy, you got to worry about this guy's psyche, people get mad at me. But like, Buck Showalter's been around baseball a long time. Buck Showalter's really respected in baseball. Buck Showalter deserves to be treated with respect from whatever organization. And I understand, like, you know, Carlos is saying, you know, yeah, he won 101 games, but they didn't do anything in the postseason. He gave up the NL East. There's no way of excusing or sugarcoating that. I'm not trying to excuse or sugarcoat that, but he did win 101 games. He was here. If you want to shit on him for this year, shit on him for this year. You want to shit on him for early exit in the playoffs? Shit on him for it. You want to shit on him for having the Braves catch him even though the Braves are playing 750 baseball? Shit on him for it. But give him credit for 101 then. He doesn't get all the blame if he doesn't get all the credit. That's how it works. And I think sometimes when these guys come in, you have to, because of the next guy. Like, ownership lasts a long time. GMs come, you hope they're here for a long time. Coaches and managers come, you hope that they're here for a long time because it means success. But ownership stays. And you have to create an atmosphere where other people who are going to come here, the David Stearns of the world, the Buck Showalters, the Craig Counsels, the Sandy Aldersons, the whomever, you have to create an environment where a guy goes, yeah, I want that job. Not, oh, you remember Buck Showalter? Remember how they treated him? That guy's like a legend. Remember how they treated him? They treated him like shit. Just kicked him out the door. Had one amazing year, had one terrible year, and they were like, bye, like yesterday's news. You can't, not everybody deserves that. Some people deserve that. I'll go back, maybe because it's what I'm thinking of, and it's where my head's at over the last 24 hours, 48 hours. You know, Adam Gase deserved to be put in a cannon and shot into outer space for what he did with the Jets. He was terrible. He has no run of success, barely has a resume, got the job because Peyton Manning made a phone call, won a Super Bowl because Peyton Manning is great, even a diminished Peyton Manning. He was here. He did nothing. He was bad with the media. His introductory press conference sucked. You just mentioned the Thanksgiving thing where he was like, yeah, I couldn't spend the time with my family. I'm going to game plan for the Bengals. And they lost to the Bengals who hadn't won a game in fucking 15 years. Next time, bro, go eat with your family. It doesn't fucking matter. So everything he did was wrong. So you want to fire that guy? Fire him. Put him in front of a firing squad. I don't give a shit what you do. Buck Showalter, good, bad, or indifferent, and I was okay with the hire when they made it. I didn't really want it to be him, and then he grew on me. So I'm keeping it all fair. If you're going to give him shit for this season, and he deserves it along with everybody else, he deserves credit along with everybody else for winning 101 games last year. And that's just how it is. And if that credit extends to, hey, Buck, why don't you come in the office? It's me, Steve, Billy, David. We want to talk about your future behind closed doors. We want to make sure this split is amicable. We want to know what you want to do. We got Craig Counsell lined up. He wants to come here. We don't want to fire you because we think it's a bad look. To me, I don't care if they do that. Good. They should. Yeah. The guy deserves respect.
Yeah, I think the point that you just made is it's about making sure that you are a franchise that gives respect, that doesn't hang people out to dry, things of that nature. And look, we've talked about this before, how sometimes it's almost to a fault with the Mets since being under Cohen, that sometimes they might leave the leash a little bit too long because they don't want to be perceived a certain way, because we're trying to get away from the Wilpon way that things were handled and the hot potato, if you will, when it comes to players and managers and general managers and things of that nature, because you want to come across as professional. So by doing something like that, by bringing him into the office and trying to figure out where their head's at, not only where his head's at, but where the overall team's outlook is and what they're trying to do. Look, I put it at 70-30. John was at 50-50. Look, it could swing either way, but I just think that when push comes to shove, I don't think managers like being lame ducks, and he has 1 year left. And I have a hard time saying that a guy would be comfortable just going out there on the 1 year. It's either I'm going to walk away, or can we start working on an extension because I still want to keep managing? Like, that's kind of where I think when it comes to this. Now, he might think differently. I don't know what's going on in Buck Showalter's head. I don't know what he wants to do. If they come to him and say, we want to give you a front office gig, we want to get you in an advisory role. If that's what happens and that's what he chooses, great. If he says, no, I want to keep managing, my question then becomes, okay, who else is going to hire Buck Showalter? I think that's a fair question. And one that he has to look across the league and say, who's going to hire me? What are the chances that I get another job? Maybe I should stay here and try to work within the office and do that so I can stay within the game. Try to help see along some of the things that I was a part of and maybe finish this thing. That's kind of where my thought process is in general with the entire thing. It's close, but I think I really believe that if Craig Counsell is available and wants to manage, I think he's going to be here as the next manager of the New York Mets.
I want to jump into the comments. There's a good back and forth going here, and I think it kind of answered the question for me in between the back and forth, but I want to add something off of what you just said. Carlos Ramos saying, you mean the same way we respected Willie Randolph? Come on, at some point, we just have to be ruthless and be loyal to winning. And Carson followed that up by saying, Carlos, that's more of a Wilpon representation of front office management. That's what they're trying to avoid. And Carlos saying, that's fair, Carson. And right before that, he said, I understand what you're saying, John. I agree with you about respect, but we're more focused. But are we more focused on respecting and being nice to people or winning? That's what I mean. And what I would say to that, obviously they've kind of had the back and forth, and I think there's closure there. What I would add to that and what you just said is, Ibby, this is how I would do it if I were Steve Cohen. If David Stearns says, look, I've talked with Craig Counsell. He did want to take some time off, but now he looks at this as a great opportunity. He doesn't want to take time off. He is going to be available because he's not signing an extension. We can talk to him at the end of the season. I think he's a great guy. I want to have him in there, but we have to have an exit strategy with Buck. Cohen says, okay, of course, you get to pick your guy. This is something we already talked about. We'll bring Buck in. They have that same meeting. It's Stearns, it's Epler, it's Cohen, it's Buck. And they say, look, man, we want to have you as a part of this organization, but we're in a transition. We think the best way to enact that transition is starting right now. Immediately, we think we're confident we can get our new manager in here, but we respect what you've done with the game. We respect what you've done with this organization in the short time we've been here. We don't want to fire you. We would like to transition you into a front office role. You've got a great working relationship with Billy Epler, and we think it's going to be a perfect fit, blah, 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 blah. If Buck says yes, great. Situation over, problem solved. If Buck says no, I want to continue managing. I'd like to instead discuss a contract extension because I don't want to be a lame duck manager. Well, then that's, to use Carlos's words, that's when you're ruthless. And you say,
right, that's
okay,
different.
Buck, you're fired. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't want it to be painted to Carlos or to anybody else that, respect is above everything. No. Baseball teams,
part of the overall process.
It's part of the process.
Yeah.
It's part of the process from start to finish. Baseball teams, sports franchises, they want to win. Winning is paramount. Winning cures everything. So what I'm trying to say is you treat him with respect, but it does take two to tango, Ibby. You know what I'm saying? If he's like, absolutely not, I'm seeing this thing through, then you fire him. Yeah. Of course. If he is providing a hindrance to your ultimate end goal, and again, if Counsell is the guy, we're just using him as a hypothetical because of the relationship and because he's a free agent. If Counsell is the guy and he says he wants to manage the Mets, and you want to get him, and you can't let Buck Showalter get in the way.
No.
But to Carson's point from earlier, if he says, look, I still want to take a year off, well, again, I think you could do much worse than Buck Showalter as your manager.
Yeah.
If Counsell's like, I'm going to go home for a year, I just need a break. I think I could be better to you guys and better serve you if I'm away from the game for a little bit. And if Buck is willing to be a lame duck manager, keep him on.
Right.
Now, if Buck says, I won't come back as a lame duck, well, then again, you got to fire him.
Yeah.
These are things that happen. So it's not respect above all, but it is respect as a part of the equation, acknowledging that it takes two to play ball. Like, you need both sides to work on this. And Steve Cohen pays Buck Showalter a lot of money with respect to what managers make, but it's obviously not going to matter. He'll fire him if he has to.
Yeah, and I think the entire process with Counsell could also come down to the same process that probably played out with David Stearns. And it's like, David, what's your price? And he's like, you got to give me $10 million a year. It's what I want. I want Friedman's money. He's like, okay. Craig, you want to manage? I think I want to take a year. Craig, we're going to offer you this. I don't know. We're going to offer you this. I don't know. All right, Craig, look, what's your number? Then you go from there. If that's if it just comes down to money and you can have the guy from the jump and he's ready to go, that's going to happen too. And then you'll see Buck out the door. Again, the respect angle that we're talking about is more so treating somebody within the game the right way and not just unceremoniously canning someone just because. You go in with a plan. This is our attack. This is what we would like to do. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking? Get an idea, and then you establish your plan from there. You don't just walk in guns blazing without a plan. That's the way you should go about it. That's why I think in the end, pure speculation on my part, I think Buck Showalter at the end of this year will step down, will work within the Mets organization doing something, and I think they attack Craig Counsell. I think it makes too much sense, and if he's willing and he wants to manage, he will manage, and he will be here because money talks.
Yeah, and I think there are some similarities, and I'm sorry to keep bringing this up again. Maybe it's because we're in the throes of football season. Maybe it's because everything that was going on with, my football team specifically over the last couple of days. But, I mentioned Adam Gase before and how much of a disaster he was. Obviously, Steve Cohen came in and bought this team from the Wilpons, and he inherited a disaster. And part of what he needed to do was clean house. And he brought Sandy Alderson back into a full-fledged role, I think, because he knew he wasn't going to be able to get anybody else better than that, right? And I think he was partially pressured by the league to bring back a guy who they knew, who they were aware of, and all this stuff. And with that, Alderson brought in some people. It didn't work out, right? Jared Porter, scumbag. Zach Scott, fucked up. Then the Mets can't get anybody else. They wind up with Billy Epler. I think Billy Epler has done a slightly below average job in totality. I think this
better seller than buyer.
Yes, better seller than buyer, and Steve Cohen's money helped him be a better seller. Yes. But he also got two very useful pieces for Tommy Pham and Dominic Leone. So I'm not going to really take him to task too much for, using all of his resources and being able to use them to the best of his ability. But what I'm trying to say is, I think you need to understand sometimes how you get to the thing is irrelevant as long as you get to the thing. And that's why I brought up the Jets. Adam Gase was an abject fucking disaster. But Adam Gase was a big part of the reason why Joe Douglas is the GM of the Jets. And Joe Douglas looks to be a big-time win in terms of what he's able to do. Now, I'm not building a statue for him yet because, there's been some things that have been imperfect. But in terms of competency in the Jets organization, Joe Douglas has brought a lot more to it than anybody not named Bill Parcells in the last 30 years. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due. So if the Mets had to go through all of this, they had to go to going back to Sandy Alderson, hiring and firing Jared Porter, hiring and firing Carlos Beltran, hiring and firing Louis Rojas, and getting Zach Scott, and then firing Zach Scott, and then bringing in Billy Epler, and then not being sure if Billy Epler was the guy. If that was the path, if it was a zigzag and not a straight line to David Stearns, I'm just happy we got David Stearns, and I don't really care how it is that we got there.
It doesn't matter how you get there. It's just about getting there and finding the right people. And like I said at the beginning, Steve Cohen has said from the jump, I have been a patient man. I'm extremely patient. And now I'm going to pounce. I'm going to get my guy. He did it. I think it's going to continue when it comes to figuring out with this manager situation and what have you. Same thing that's going to apply when it comes to players. It's a great time. As crazy as it is because of the season that it just really went on as we're entering into the second week of September and we're near the end with the record that this team has, which has been, it's going to end up being the worst record this team has had probably in the last 4 or 5 years, which is crazy because of the payroll and stuff. But they're in a very good place. As crazy as it sounds to say, as crazy as that sounds, they are in a really good place because they have smart people coming in. They have money available to them. They have, they made out with this deadline. Other teams were criticizing and making fun and poking fun. And they're selling, and you got all this money. You're a joke and blah blah blah. Look at the stats. Same thing we did last year when we said look at the stats, the guys that get dealt at the deadline and how they do for those new teams. Look at the numbers. They're not good. Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers of the players that have come in to the Mets. And I am not going to stand here because I was pissed off before because I know people have been doing it and poking fun and joking about injuries and things like that. I don't do that. I don't make fun of injuries. It sucks that people get hurt, but still, I'll use it as a point of, look, you gave up and you paid to get a better prospect to get rid of Max Scherzer. Didn't do so hot with the Rangers. Now he's hurt. Now he's out for the year with the teres major strain, which is the same thing that Verlander had at the start of the season. We had seen that Max was having issues while he was here. Got rid of him, paid up. You get Luis Angel Acuna to come in and is one of your top prospects within the top 75 in baseball. You give away Justin Verlander, who's pitching to a 4 ERA and giving up home runs more times than not for Houston, who's in a hunt. And what do you get back? Drew Gilbert, who has a near 1,000 OPS for AA in Binghamton. Ryan Clifford, who's got 6 home runs already for the Mets in this organization, who's over 20 home runs for the season. Okay? You get very good players. And to John's point before, Dominic Leone bringing in his name's escaped me, but he's got like 20-something home runs already too. He's having a great job, and he's doing a great job at AA. Just getting the pieces that you did. This team is in a good spot. It really is. You have ammo to work with, not only on the money side, but you have ammo to work with within the trade market as well. And when you bring in new people like to have flexibility. And David Stearns and the crew that he decides to assemble is going to have all the free reign to do what they please because of said flexibility.
Yeah, I agree with that. Joe K, Jeremiah Jackson.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Carson saying trading age for youth, you can never go wrong, which is very true. Joe K also saying, look at the Padres and the Yankees who passed on a golden opportunity to sell.
Out of stubbornness.
Out of stubbornness. And Patty and NYC actually just said it. Yankees sure did at Joe K. Unbelievable, actually. And the reason why I bring that up specifically is because the Padres have a flawed team, clearly. There's a flawed formula in what's going on. But the Padres have some objectively great players. They also have some younger players who make contributions, who don't make a ton of money relative to, their entirety of their team and stuff like that. Do I think they should have sold? Yes. But the Yankees should have sold everything that was not nailed down. Anybody who is not named Aaron Judge.
Exactly.
Should have been
Judge
sold.
And Cole, essentially. Yeah.
Judge and Cole. Everybody else, you want him, you can fucking have him. Gleyber Torres, good player. Not the player we thought he was going to be. Fucking take him. Take this guy. Take that guy. Now, some of them, obviously, no one was going to take, right? No one was going to take Anthony Rizzo on the year that he was having and the injury and all this shit. But that's why anybody else who was not nailed down, anybody else who was not a part of this, you sell them off. And James Dowling saying this, and I think this is not news, but Ibby, I think this bears repeating a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
Met fans forget what a shit show they were before Cohen. And I bring this up because I think, BC before Cohen. I think every time, I think this should be brought up from time to time as a reminder. And I think now is a good time as any because David Stearns is going to take over. And you might not like everything he does. You might not agree with everything. You might not agree with the transition year where I think they're still going to be highly competitive, but I think we can all agree that it's going to be a transition year. Remember how much of a shit show the Mets were before Cohen. None of this stuff happens overnight. None of it. And I think that's really, really, really important to acknowledge. This is a good one too. I didn't even think of this. Angels. And man, the Angels could have gotten
Don't get me started on the
anything
Angels.
for Ohtani and Trout during the trade deadline. Now Ohtani, I don't want to say damaged goods because I feel like that's disrespectful, but he is hurt and it's going to take away some of what he excels at. Trout also goes on the IL. They also wind up putting every player on waivers that they acquired at the deadline. You want to get a how-to of not how to do a trade deadline? Look at what the Angels did. So,
Joke.
look, it hasn't been a great season, but we are in a spot where we're in a spot that is a lot better than we could be in. Let's put it that way. We're in a spot that is so much better. And it goes back to the fact that I just have faith in Cohen. I know Cohen is not a baseball owner for a long time.
He's a winner is what he is. He's a winner.
Cohen doesn't lose.
He's a winner.
You don't get to where Cohen is by losing.
And you could say, well, he lost this season. He spent all that money paying the tax and all this. It doesn't matter. He says, I'll eat the money.
Baby.
Sunk cost. I'll move forward.
Cost.
I'll keep going. Like,
give me the hedge. Give me the hedge fund guy dealing with sunk costs. Carson said age for youth can't go wrong. Let the hedge fund guy manage sunk cost and acquisitions. Can't go wrong.
It's fine. It's not going to go wrong. I'll gladly roll forward with that. I am beyond excited. I am so pumped up for this season to obviously to it's weird to say I'm so pumped up for the season to end, but it's more so because I'm really excited because I love the inner workings of baseball and how teams build and I've been craving it and wanting it for so long for this team. And I finally feel like it's going to really happen this year and the years moving forward because not only can Steve Cohen provide the money for players on the field, but he can provide the money for the people that are helping build those players on the field in the front office, get the things that are needed, the pitching lab, better the facilities, give people everything that they need in order to succeed. That's what makes winning baseball teams. That's what makes teams like the Dodgers successful, the Astros successful on a lower scale with money, but on the smart end, the Rays and Cleveland makes them better. How teams like the Giants are winning. You need to do this. He said it best during that press conference, and he goes, we are behind the 8 ball. We have been behind the 8 ball for the last near decade because these teams are well ahead of us because they've had these things and we haven't. Now I'm playing catch up and I'm going to dump my money into this to make sure that we can get there quicker than it normally would take. Instead of 8 years, we're going to try to get there in 5 years or 3 years, whatever it may be. Lose the thought process of what he said. Lose the entire idea of what he said. I'll be upset 3 to 5 years, blah, blah, blah. Who gives a shit about that? Let it go. This team is in the right hands. They're going to do well moving forward. It might take a little bit of time, but you are on the right track, Mets fans, and you should be very excited.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I love that to close out the show. I love saying, forget about the 3 to 5 year window. Cause you know what? It'd be like I said before about, how people would have rioted if they didn't bring back key pieces from a 101 win team. People would have rioted if Steve Cohen takes over with all the bluster and the bravado and the money and trying to be the anti-Wilpon. And remember, he was here as a minority owner, which, really just a glorified season ticket holder in a lot of ways, but because of his access and money and contributions and stuff, he was there shoulder to shoulder with the Wilpons in the owner's box and stuff if he wanted to. If he came in here and was like, yeah, guys, I'm just going to do the best I can, be like, this fucking guy doesn't have a clue. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, people would have been like, this guy.
Yeah.
I'm worried.
Where's the fire?
Listen, winning the press conference, going back to how you hire NFL coaches and all this stuff. Yeah. Winning press conferences doesn't matter unless it does, right? If you win the press conference and you're Max Scherzer and then you shit the bed in year 2 and you're out of here, no one's ever going to remember that. But if you shit the bed at the press conference and you're Adam Gase, it's like, I don't know, man. From jump, this guy seemed like a fucking idiot. Yeah. If you come in there, though, and you're Rex Ryan and you say, we ain't here to kiss Bill Belichick's rings, oh, shit. That's what Jets fans want to hear.
Yeah.
And Mets fans who have been starved and suffering, we all wanted to hear, yeah, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, I'd like to have a World Series trophy because I'm going to be upset if not because I didn't buy this team to lose. Fuck yeah. Give me that.
Let's go.
Give me that every time.
Yeah.
But, and even the way he walked it back kind of was the right thing to do, where he was like, look, I was new at ownership and, I didn't know what it was going to take to really build this. And like you said, we were behind the 8 ball for so long. I don't look at that as backtracking. I look at that as learning. I look at that as opening up and understanding what it takes. And so, I think that stuff is so important to do and to acknowledge. And he is a winner, and I trust him. I trust him. I do. The fact that he's a fan first, the fact that Stearns is a fan first, doesn't mean that they're going to be a good owner and good president of baseball ops. But it does
know the landscape.
It does help. Exactly. It does help in you knowing what you're looking for, what you're seeing, what you want to see, what the fans want to see. It helps. And then if you're competent on top of that, and you're a winner on top of that, and you know what you're doing on top of that, it's only a matter of time, Mets fans. I promise you that. I promise you that. That said, let's get out of here. It'll be hour and 15 minutes or so into the show.
Yeah.
Carlos Ramos saying, great show, guys. We appreciate that. Guys, if you're still watching, and there's a lot of you, hit the thumbs up if you haven't already.
Thumbs up.
It helps the algorithm, all that stuff. Of course, you can listen to the entire show once we're done. If you missed anything and you came in late, this is a great comment from Joe K. Every owner should want to win a World Series in 3 to 5 years. That's great. That's true. Everybody on a 3 to 5 year cycle, you should be like, yeah, I'm trying to win. I'm trying to win. I'm trying to win. Yeah. That's a great point. And even if you're in the basement of the league, like the Houston Astros were, they tanked 3 to 5 years later. They're a perennial contender each and every single year. So that's a great point. You can listen to any part of this show and go back and watch it on our YouTube channel, appropriately called Till Mets Do Us Part. Or, of course, you can listen to any of this tomorrow, all courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network. I'm John. That's Ibby. We could not do it without you guys. Thank you so much for being active participants in this chat. It makes it so much more fun to do what we do. This was a great show that we love doing when it was just an audio show and we recorded and we interacted with each other. But honestly, interacting with all of you makes it so much better. We really appreciate it. So we'll see you guys next week. Peace.